Welcome to my channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. Have you ever lived in a house that felt wrong? Not haunted exactly, but like it was keeping secrets from you? I moved into 1247 Maple Street in Burlington, Vermont last October. Beautiful Victorian home, original hardwood floors, crown molding, and a basement door that opens by itself every single night at 3:17 a.m. The realtor never mentioned that part. What would you do if you discovered your new home had its own schedule? Would you investigate, or would you do what I did for the first week and pretend it wasn't happening? Because let me tell you something. Some doors are meant to stay closed, and some secrets, well, they're buried in basements for a reason. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what really happened in that house, and why I'll never, ever, ignore a door that opens by itself again. The story begins now. The moving truck pulled away just as the autumn sun dipped behind the Vermont mountains. October in New England. There's nothing quite like it. The air smells like wood smoke and dying leaves. Everything feels cozy and mysterious at the same time. I stood in my new living room, surrounded by boxes, feeling that particular mix of exhaustion and excitement that comes with starting over. After my divorce, after losing my job at the marketing firm in Boston, this house felt like a fresh start. The price had been suspiciously low for such a beautiful property, but the inspector said everything checked out. Solid foundation, good bones, just needed some love. That first night I barely unpacked anything. Just my bed, some clothes, basic kitchen stuff. I collapsed into bed around 11, dead tired from the move. The house made those settling sounds old houses make, creaks and sighs as the temperature dropped. Comforting, really, like the house was getting comfortable too. Then I heard it, a soft click, followed by the unmistakable groan of hinges. I sat up, heart suddenly pounding. Living alone makes you hyper-aware of sounds. Every noise could be an intruder. I grabbed my phone, using its flashlight as I crept down the hallway. The house was still. Shadows danced on the walls from the streetlight outside. The basement door stood wide open. I definitely remembered closing it. The realtor had shown me the basement earlier, unfinished but dry. Just concrete walls and exposed beams. Perfect for storage. I'd closed that door. Locked it even, because the old-fashioned skeleton key had been sitting right there in the lock. But now, open. The darkness beyond looked thick, impenetrable. Like black velvet. "Hello?" My voice cracked. God, I felt ridiculous. Calling out like some horror movie victim. Nothing. I flicked the light switch. The single bulb at the top of the stairs flickered on, casting harsh shadows down the wooden steps. Everything looked normal. Just a basement. I started down the stairs, each step creaking under my weight. No, wait. What was I doing? I'd seen enough movies to know better. I backed up, shut the door firmly, and turned the key. The lock clicked solidly into place. Must have been the house settling. Old houses do weird things. The door probably wasn't hung right. I'd add it to my list of fixes. I went back to bed, but sleep came slowly. And when it did, I dreamed of darkness, thick, breathing darkness that pressed against doors, looking for a way in. The next morning, I woke to sunshine streaming through the windows. The house looked beautiful in daylight, warm, inviting. I laughed at myself for being so jumpy. First night in a new place, of course I'd been on edge. I made coffee, started unpacking the kitchen. Around noon, I remembered the basement door and went to check. Still locked, see? Just my imagination. That night, I made sure to lock it before bed. turned the key twice, even gave the handle a good tug to make sure. Solid. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of that door opening. This time, I looked at my phone as I lay there, frozen. 3:17 exactly. The groan of hinges seemed louder in the darkness. Longer, like the door was opening slowly, deliberately. I didn't get up, told myself it was the wind. Old houses have drafts, temperature changes, completely normal. I pulled the covers over my head like a child and waited for morning. But I knew. I knew that door was open. Sure enough, when I finally got up at 7, there it stood, wide open. The skeleton key still in the lock, turned to the open position. This continued for 5 more nights. Every night, I'd lock the door. Every night at 3:17 a.m., I'd hear it open. By the 7th night, I'd stopped checking. What was the point? It would be open. It was always open. I started sleeping with earplugs, but the earplugs didn't stop the dreams. Every night now, I dreamed of that basement. Sometimes I was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down into impossible darkness. Sometimes I was already at the bottom, feeling my way along cold concrete walls that went on forever. And sometimes I wasn't alone down there. I could hear breathing that wasn't mine. Slow, patient, like something that had all the time in the world. I started avoiding that hallway during the day, taking the long way around through the dining room to get to the kitchen. Stupid, but that door, even closed and locked, it felt wrong, like it was watching me, waiting. You can only ignore something for so long. By the 2nd week, the earplugs weren't enough, because it wasn't just the sound keeping me awake, it was the knowing. Knowing that door was open. Knowing that darkness was spilling into my hallway. I tried everything rational first. Called a locksmith. Big guy named Dave, been in the business 30 years. He examined the door, the frame, the lock. Nothing wrong with it, he said, testing the mechanism. Solid as they come, these old locks, they're actually harder to pick than modern ones. But it keeps opening by itself. He gave me that look, the one that says crazy city person who doesn't understand old houses. Humidity changes, he said. Wood swells and contracts. Sometimes doors pop open. You could try a deadbolt. But I knew a deadbolt wouldn't help. Whatever was opening that door was turning the key. I tried other things, stupid things. Put a chair against the door, found it moved aside in the morning, placed neatly against the wall. Tried tying string from the door handle to the banister. Found it untied, coiled perfectly on the floor. Even sprinkled flour on the floor to catch footprints. In the morning, the flour was undisturbed, except for a single line through it, like something had dragged itself across without using feet. Next, I set up my laptop to record. Positioned it in the hallway with a clear view of the door. Started recording before bed, locked the door, went to sleep. At 3:17 a.m., I heard it open. The next morning, I reviewed the footage with my coffee, expecting to finally have answers. What I saw made my hands shake so badly I spilled coffee all over my kitchen table. At 3:16 a.m., the hallway was still. At 3:17 a.m. exactly, the skeleton key began to turn. Slowly, deliberately, like invisible fingers were gripping it. The lock clicked. The door swung open into perfect darkness. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what happened at 3:18 a.m. The darkness in the doorway moved. Not like shadows move when light changes, this was different. The darkness seemed to breathe, to pulse, like it was tasting the air of my hallway. Then, at 3:47 a.m., the door closed. The key turned, click. I must have watched that video 20 times. Showed it to my friend Sarah when she visited from Boston. That's edited, right? She asked. I wished it was. she stayed the night, determined to see for herself. We sat in the hallway with flashlights watching the door. At 3:16, we tensed. At 3:17, click. The key turned, the door opened. Sarah's flashlight beam cut into the darkness beyond. Nothing, just stairs leading down. But the darkness seemed thicker than it should be, like our lights couldn't quite penetrate it properly. "Maybe there's someone living down there," she whispered. "A squatter, or—" "Every night at exactly 3:17, I whispered back. "And how do they lock it from the inside when the only key is up here?" We sat there for 30 minutes, neither of us willing to go down those stairs. The air from the basement was cold, too cold for October. And that smell, that sweet, organic smell I'd noticed before. Stronger now. Sarah covered her nose. "What is that?" she asked. I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because I'd started noticing something else. The darkness at the bottom of the stairs, it wasn't uniform. It had depth, texture, like looking into deep water at night. Finally, at 3:47, the door swung shut. The key turned. Sarah left the next morning. Early, made excuses about needing to get back for work, but I saw the way she looked at that door. She felt it too, the wrongness. "Maybe you should stay at my place for a while," she suggested as she loaded her car. "Just until you figure this out." But I couldn't leave. Not yet. I needed to understand. This was my house, my fresh start. I wasn't going to be driven out by a door. That night, alone again, I did something stupid. Or brave. Depends on how you look at it. I went down. At 3:10 a.m., I positioned myself at the top of the basement stairs. Inside. In the dark. I'd closed the door behind me, leaving the key in the hallway lock. My plan was simple. Wait inside, see what happened when the door opened. See if something came out or went in. The basement smelled different at night. During the day, it was just musty concrete and old wood. But now, there was something else. Sweet. Organic. Like overripe fruit left in the sun too long. I sat on the top step, flashlight off to save battery, phone in my hand. 3:15. My heart hammered so loud I was sure it would give me away. To what, I didn't know. 3:16. The darkness pressed against my eyes. That complete darkness you only get in windowless spaces. I could hear my own breathing, too fast, too shallow. And underneath it, was that my imagination, or was there another sound, a whisper of air, like something else breathing? Waiting. 3:17. The lock clicked above me. The door swung open and hallway light spilled onto the stairs, but I wasn't looking at that. I was looking at what was happening in the basement. The darkness was moving, shifting, like something massive was unfolding itself from the concrete floor. My flashlight beam shook as I clicked it on, sweeping across the basement. Empty. Completely empty. Except, the floor wasn't right. Where solid concrete should have been, there was a hole. Rough edges, like something had pushed up from below. The sweet smell was stronger here, and from deep in that hole came a sound. Breathing. Slow. Deep. Patient. I scrambled backwards up the stairs, through the door, slammed it shut. My hands shook so badly I could barely turn the key. But I locked it. Locked it and ran to my bedroom, where I sat against the wall until dawn, clutching a kitchen knife I knew would be useless. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. By the third day, exhaustion was making me see things. Shadows moving in my peripheral vision. Dark shapes in mirrors that vanished when I looked directly at them. The sweet smell from the basement had spread through the house. Faint, but always there, like something rotting in the walls. I started researching online, searching for anything about 1247 Maple Street. Found an old forum post from 2010. Someone asking about the house with the door that opens. The responses were vague. warnings. People who'd lived there or knew someone who had. All saying the same thing. Don't go in the basement. Don't look for answers. Just leave. But one comment stood out, from a user named dparkuvm. It's not a basement. Check the geological surveys. That hole goes deeper than it should. The username, David Park. The geology student who'd disappeared in 1978. I needed answers, real answers. The next day, I called the previous owner. Tracked her down through property records. Mrs. Chen, elderly woman who'd lived there 40 years before moving to assisted living. "Oh, you bought the Maple Street house," she said when I explained who I was. Her voice went flat. "How are you sleeping?" "Not well. There's something wrong with the basement door." A long pause, then, "It opens at 3:17. My blood went cold. "You know about it?" "Everyone who's lived there knows about it. My husband tried to seal it once. Concrete blocks. The door still opened. The blocks were moved, pushed aside like they were made of paper." "What's down there?" Another pause. Longer. "I don't know," she finally said. "And I lived there 40 years without finding out. You want my advice? Don't look. Don't investigate. Just let it open. Let it close. It's been doing it longer than that house has stood." "What do you mean?" "The Historical Society has records. Every house built on that spot, going back to the 1700s, they all had basements, and they all had doors that opened at 3:17. That's impossible, is it?" Her voice was tired. "You've seen it open. You've looked into that darkness. Does anything about it feel possible?" I wanted to argue, but couldn't. She was right. Nothing about this was possible. But it was happening. "My husband went down once," she continued, "middle of the night, just like you. Came back up white as a sheet. Wouldn't tell me what he saw, but he never went near that door again. And for the next week, things were different." "Different how?" "The door started opening earlier. 3:16, then 3:15, like something was eager, impatient. We started finding things moved in the house. Small things. A book, a shoe. Always closer to the basement door. Like they were being collected." My mouth went dry. "What did you do?" "We left for a week, stayed in a hotel. When we came back, everything was normal again. 3:17, just like always. But we never found the things that went missing. And my husband, he never went into the basement again, not even during the day." "Did he ever tell you what he saw?" "Once, years later, when he was dying." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "He said there were teeth, rows and rows of teeth, and the hole, it wasn't a hole, it was a mouth." I thanked her and hung up, but I couldn't leave it at that. I spent the day at the Burlington Historical Society, searching through old records, property deeds, newspaper archives, looking for any mention of 1247 Maple Street. What I found made me wish I'd listened to Mrs. Chen. The Burlington Historical Society was a treasure trove of disturbing information. The elderly volunteer, Margaret, seemed unsurprised when I mentioned my address. "Another one," she muttered, pulling out a thick folder labeled Maple Street Incidents. "Another one? You're the 5th person to come asking about that property in the past decade. They never stay long." The records went back to 1743. The first house built on that spot belonged to a merchant named Josiah Hartwell. His diary, preserved in climate-controlled storage, made for chilling reading. October 15th, 1743. The cellar door opens of its own accord each night at the devil's hour. Martha believes it to be spirits, but I fear something worse. There is a breathing in the darkness below, a patient sound, as if the earth itself were alive. October 22nd, 1743. I have seen it. God help me. I have seen what lies beneath. It is older than this land, older than memory. It waits below, as it has always waited. The natives knew. They built no dwellings here. They knew what slept beneath. October 30th, 1743. The door opens earlier now. 3:15, then 3:10. It knows I have seen it. It hungers. I hear whispers in the walls, names, so many names, all those who have fed it through the years. Tomorrow I will seal the cellar. If this journal is found, and I am not, know that I tried. The thing below must not be allowed to rise. Hartwell disappeared in 1751. His wife found the basement door open one morning, and Josiah was simply gone. No body, no trace. Just his shoes at the top of the stairs. The pattern repeated through history. Different houses. The original burned in 1832, rebuilt in 1833. That one was torn down in 1891, replaced by my Victorian. But always, there were reports of the basement door and disappearances. 1773, Catherine Hartwell, Josiah's daughter-in-law, gone. 1828, 2 children from the Morrison family, gone. 1849, a traveling salesman staying at what was then a boarding house, gone. 1903, the entire Fitzgerald family, 4 people, gone. 1924, a prohibition agent investigating the basement for bootlegging, gone. 1941, 3 soldiers billeted in the house during training, gone. 67, a hippie commune tried to live there. 5 people, all gone in one night. Always the same. The door found open. Personal belongings left behind. No bodies, no explanation. Margaret showed me newspaper clippings. Each time the disappearances were explained away. People assumed to have run off. Mental breakdowns, family troubles, but the pattern was clear if you looked. The city tried to demolish the house in 1973, Margaret said, adjusting her glasses. The wrecking ball broke 3 times. The operator said it was like hitting solid rock, even though it was just wood and plaster. They gave up, sold it instead. The most recent disappearance was in 1978. A geology student from UVM named David Park had been renting a room. His landlord found his clothes folded neatly at the top of the basement stairs. David was never seen again, but it was his research I found most interesting. Before he vanished, David had been investigating unusual geological formations in the area. His notes, donated to the Historical Society by his family, included ground-penetrating radar images of the land beneath Maple Street, the hole I'd seen in my basement. According to David's research, it went down, and down, and down. Far deeper than should be possible given the water table in the area. The readings showed a cavity extending at least 300 feet straight down, then branching out in all directions like roots or veins, and it wasn't natural. The edges showed tool marks, ancient ones, pre-Columbian, maybe older. His final note, dated 3 days before his disappearance, simply read, "It's not a basement, it's a throat, and I think it's swallowing." There was one more document, a letter from 1923, written by a Professor Edmund Blackwood from Harvard's Department of Anthropology. He'd been studying native legends in the area. The Abenaki people have no name for it. They simply call it the hunger below. Their stories speak of something that fell from the stars in the time before memory, something that burrowed deep and slept, but it does not sleep peacefully. Every night it tests its bonds. Every night it calls for food. The indigenous people learn to appease it. Small offerings, animals. But when the Europeans came, they built upon the forbidden ground, and the hunger grew. Now it takes people. Now it feeds on something more than flesh. I have seen the petroglyphs they tried to hide, the warnings carved in stone. Do not wake it, do not feed it, do not look upon it, for those who see it are marked, and the marked always return to the mouth. I left the Historical Society as the sun was setting, my mind reeling, drove home on autopilot, trying to process what I'd learned. The house sat quietly on Maple Street, looking perfectly normal, just another Victorian among many. But I knew better now. That night, I packed a bag. I was done. Whatever was in that basement, whatever had been feeding for centuries, I wasn't going to be its next meal. I'd leave in the morning, find a hotel, put the house back on the market. But first, I had to see it one more time. I had to know if what Mrs. Chen's husband saw was real, if what Josiah Hartwell described was true. Just one look, from the top of the stairs, then I'd leave forever. At 3:16, I stood at the basement door, hand on the key. My bag was by the front door, my car keys in my pocket. Just one look. 3:17. I turned the key, opened the door. The basement was different. The hole was bigger, much bigger, taking up most of the floor now, and from deep within came a soft pink light, pulsing like a heartbeat. I shined my flashlight down. The beam seemed to get swallowed by the hole, but I could see something, wet, organic, moving. And then I saw them, teeth, rows and rows of human teeth, spiraling down into the darkness. Thousands of them, millions, all perfectly preserved, all slightly moving as if tasting the air. Between the teeth I saw other things, bones, clothes, watches, glasses, shoes, all the remnants of all the people who'd gone missing. They were part of it now, part of the walls of that terrible throat. And at the very edge of my flashlight beam, I saw something that made my blood freeze. Eyes, human eyes, dozens of them, still moving, still watching, still aware. The breathing sound grew louder, eager. The hole widened slightly, and I realized with sick certainty that it could swallow the entire house if it wanted. It was choosing to wait, choosing to feed slowly, savoring each meal across the centuries. I stumbled backward, and that's when I heard the whispers. Hundreds of voices, all the people who'd been taken, all still somehow alive down there, still conscious, still part of it. They were saying names, over and over, names of people who'd lived in the house, names of people who'd looked into the hole, and then I heard it, clear as day. My name. They were saying my name. I ran, slammed the door, grabbed my bag, fled to my car, drove through the night, putting as much distance between me and that house as possible. Didn't stop until I reached Ohio. Didn't feel safe until I was in California. I live in San Diego now, as far from Vermont as I could get. Found a job, a new apartment, a new life. But some nights, I wake up at 3:17 a.m. Even here, 3,000 miles away, I wake up at exactly 3:17. And I wonder, what if it's not the house that's marked? What if it's the people who've lived there, who've seen it? Mrs. Chen's husband saw it. He died in his sleep. The newspaper said natural causes. But what if when the marked die, that's when it finally feeds? What if death is just another kind of door, another kind of mouth? I've started noticing things. Small things, objects moving in my apartment. Always closer to my bedroom door. The sweet smell sometimes, late at night. And last week I found a tooth on my pillow. Not mine. Old, yellowed, human. They say you can't run from your problems. But I'm going to keep trying. Because the alternative is accepting that some doors, once opened, can never really be closed, and that some hungers can follow you anywhere. Last night, I woke to find my bedroom door open, just a crack, and through that crack, I swear I could see stars, but not normal stars. These were wrong, too close, too hungry. I'm uploading this story everywhere I can, Facebook, Reddit, YouTube. If something happens to me, if I disappear, check the basement of wherever I was living. Check for teeth, check for eyes. And whatever you do, don't look too long, because once you see it, once you really see it, it sees you too, and it never, ever forgets. The door opens at 3:17. Every night, in every house I live in now. It's just a crack, just enough to let the darkness in, just enough to remind me that I belong to it, that we all belong to it in the end. Sweet dreams, everyone, and remember, if your door opens by itself at night, maybe just let it. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, some depths are better left unplumbed, because once you know what's down there, once you've seen it, you become part of its collection, part of its patience, part of its terrible, endless hunger. I can hear it calling my name. Even now, even here, 3:17 is coming. Did this story keep you up? Are you checking your doors right now? I need to know I'm not alone in this. Comment below if you've ever experienced something in your house you couldn't explain. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more true stories about places that shouldn't exist, and the things that hunger in the dark. And remember, 3:17 comes every night. What's opening doors in your house? Story number 2. Picture this. You're driving alone on a stretch of highway so empty you haven't seen another car for the past hour. The radio's been cutting in and out with static for miles now. And then, you see him, a figure on the side of the road, thumb out, waiting. But here's the thing that'll make your skin crawl. He's not looking at the road, he's looking directly at you, like he's been waiting, specifically for you. Before I tell you what happened next, let me ask you something. What's the one thing you've never told anyone? That secret you keep locked so deep you sometimes forget it's there? Well, what if I told you there's someone out there who already knows? The story begins now. I've driven Interstate 70 through Kansas more times than I can count. Sales territory stretches from Denver to Kansas City, and that stretch through western Kansas, it's like driving through a void. Nothing but wheat fields and wind for hundreds of miles. It was October, late October. The kind of night where the darkness seems thicker somehow. I'd left Denver around 3 in the afternoon, hoping to make it to Hayes before stopping. But a client meeting ran long, and by the time I hit the really empty stretch past Lyman, it was already past 11. I was somewhere between Cheyenne Wells and Kit Carson when I saw him. Just standing there, on the shoulder, in the middle of absolutely nowhere. My first thought was, car trouble. Had to be. Nobody hitchhikes anymore, not out here, but there was no broken down car, no hazard lights, just this guy, standing perfectly still, thumb out, wearing what looked like an old army jacket, and he was staring right at me, not at the road, at me, through my windshield, like he could see me coming from miles away. I should have kept driving. Every instinct said, keep driving. But guilt's a funny thing. What if his phone was dead? What if he'd been standing there for hours? My foot eased off the gas, the speedometer dropped from 75 to 60, then 50. Don't be stupid, Marcus, I said out loud. That's something I do on long drives, talk to myself. You don't pick up hitchhikers. But my foot kept easing off that pedal. 40 miles per hour now, I could see him more clearly, middle-aged, clean-shaven. That army jacket was olive green, Vietnam era. He had a small backpack at his feet. He wasn't moving, wasn't waving, just standing there, thumb out, watching me slow down like he knew I would. I pulled over. The gravel crunched under my tires as I stopped about 20 feet past him. I looked in my rearview mirror. He was already walking toward my car. Not rushing, just walking, like he had all the time in the world. He opened the passenger door and the dome light came on. That's when I saw his eyes for the first time. They were normal, just brown eyes. But there was something about the way he looked at me, like he was reading something written on my face. "Thanks for stopping," he said. His voice was quiet, soft almost. "Been waiting a while." "Yeah, no problem," I heard myself say. "Where you headed?" He settled into the seat, placing his backpack between his feet. "East, same as you, Marcus." I froze. My hand was on the gear shift, about to put the car back in drive, and I just froze. "I'm sorry. What did you say?" He was buckling his seatbelt, taking his time. I said, "I'm heading east, same as you." "No, you said my name." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and there was this moment, this split second, where I could have sworn his eyes weren't brown anymore. They were black, completely black. Then I blinked, and they were brown again. "Did I?" He smiled, just a little. "Sorry. Long day. Mind if we get moving?" Every alarm bell in my head was going off, but instead, I put the car in drive, pulled back onto the highway. We drove in silence for maybe 5 minutes. 5 minutes where I kept glancing at him out of the corner of my eye. He was just sitting there, hands folded in his lap, looking straight ahead. Then he spoke again. "You know, Marcus, everybody's got secrets." My throat went dry. "Excuse me?" "Secrets. Things we keep hidden, even from ourselves sometimes." He shifted slightly, turning to look at me. "Take you, for example. I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you do." His voice was still soft, almost hypnotic. "Denver office, regional sales manager. Married to Janet for, what is it now, 15 years? Beautiful house in Highlands Ranch, 2 kids, Sarah's 13, Tommy's 10. The car swerved slightly. I corrected quickly, but my hands were shaking. Who are you?" "Just a guy who needs a ride." He turned back to face the windshield. "But you're not just a sales manager, are you, Marcus? That's not why you really take all these long trips." "Stop. All those client meetings that run late, all those overnight stays in random motels. Janet thinks you're so dedicated." I said, "Stop. But we both know what room 237 at the Moonlight Motel in Burlington is really for, don't we?" I slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop in the middle of the highway. No other cars, no lights except our headlights cutting through darkness. "Get out," I said. My voice was barely a whisper. "Get out of my car." He didn't move. "You can't run from it, Marcus. Can't run from what you did." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Thursday nights. That's when you usually stop there, isn't it?" He pulled something from his jacket pocket. A phone. He turned the screen toward me. "October 15th, last Thursday, you checked in at 9:47 p.m. On the screen was a photo. Security camera footage. Me, walking into room 237. But I wasn't alone. "No," I whispered. "No, you can't." "She was 19, Marcus. Barely older than your daughter will be in a few years. She said she was 22. She showed me ID. Did she? Or did you just choose to believe that?" He put the phone away. "But that's not even your biggest secret, is it?" I was crying now, tears streaming down my face. "Please. I don't know who you are or what you want. What I want." He laughed, soft and low. "I don't want anything, Marcus. I'm just here to help you remember." "Remember what?" "Why you left Chicago so suddenly 5 years ago. Why you changed your name. Why Janet thinks your parents died in a car accident when they're actually living in Bloomington." Each word hit like a physical blow. Things I'd buried, things I'd convinced myself didn't matter anymore. "Your real name is Martin Sawyer," he continued. "And on March 22nd, 2019, you—" "Stop!" I screamed. "I know what I did." Silence. Just the engine idling, the headlights illuminating empty road. "Do you, Martin, do you really know? Or do you just know the story you've been telling yourself?" I couldn't look at him. "She was drunk, Megan Phillips. She ran the red light. The police said it wasn't my fault. But you'd been drinking too. Just 2 beers, just enough to be under the limit. But you knew your reflexes were slower. It wasn't my fault. Her daughter was 4, Emma. Woke up the next morning asking where Mommy was." I was sobbing now. Full body sobs. 5 years of guilt. 5 years of running. I didn't mean, I know. And somehow I believed he did. But meaning and doing are different things, aren't they? I don't know how long I sat there crying. Time seemed to stop on that empty highway. When I finally looked up, he was offering me a tissue. "Thanks," I muttered. "We should probably move," he said. "Don't want someone coming around that curve at 80. I put the car back in drive, started forward. Slower now. 55. Like the weight of truth was pressing down on the accelerator. "How?" I finally asked. "How do you know all this? Does it matter?" "Yes. Are you a cop? Private investigator?" That soft laugh again. "No, Marcus. I'm just someone who sees things. Sees what people carry with them." We drove in silence for a while. The highway stretched endlessly ahead. "What happens now?" I asked. "You going to blackmail me? What do you think should happen?" "I don't know. I've been asking myself that for 5 years." I glanced at him. Some nights I think about turning myself in, but then I think about Janet, the kids. "So, instead, you go to motels with girls. I'm not proud of it. I didn't say you were." The exit for Burlington was coming up. The exit with the Moonlight Motel. Room 237. "Take the exit," he said suddenly. "What? No, I'm not—" "Take the exit, Marcus." Something in his voice, not threatening, just certain. I took the exit. The Moonlight Motel sat just off the highway, one of those old motor lodges from the 60s. 2 stories. Exterior corridors, the kind of place that rents rooms by the hour. "Park," he said. I pulled into the lot. He pointed to the 2nd floor. Room 237. The door was open. Just a crack. Light coming from inside. "She's waiting for you." My blood went cold. "Who? You know who." And somehow I did. I knew exactly who was behind that door. "No," I whispered. "She's dead. She's been dead for 5 years. Dead doesn't mean gone, Marcus. You carry her with you every day, every time you look in the mirror, every time you kiss your wife. This isn't real." He turned to look at me, and his eyes, they weren't brown anymore. They were nothing. Just empty sockets full of stars. "Real is relative," he said. "What matters is what you do next." I got out of the car. The October air was sharp, cold. The stairs to the 2nd floor looked impossibly tall, but I was walking, 1 foot in front of the other. I stopped outside room 237, hand raised to knock. "What's in there?" I asked without turning around. "What do you think is in there?" I think Megan Phillips is in there." "Then you should probably hear what she has to say." I pushed the door open. The room wasn't room 237 anymore. It was somewhere else. The walls were glass, or ice. And sitting on what used to be the bed, Megan Phillips looked exactly like she did in the newspaper photos. Young, pretty, blonde hair in a ponytail, wearing the blue scrubs she'd been wearing that night. But her eyes were like his. empty spaces full of impossible things. "Hello, Martin," she said. Her voice was soft, tired. "I've been waiting. I'm sorry." The words tumbled out. "I'm so sorry. I know you are." She stood, moved closer. "I've watched you be sorry for 5 years. Watched you change your name, build a new life, try to outrun what happened. I didn't mean to kill me. No. But you meant to have those beers, meant to get behind the wheel." She was right in front of me now. "Just like you mean to go to this motel, mean to pay those girls, mean to betray your wife. I hate myself for it. I know. But hating yourself doesn't help anyone, doesn't bring me back, doesn't give Emma her mother. What do you want from me?" She tilted her head. "I want to be alive. I want to go home to my daughter. I want to finish my nursing degree, but we don't always get what we want. I could turn myself in. Confess. Could you? And what would that solve? Would it bring me back? Would it help Emma, who's 9 now and happy with her aunt's family? Then what?" She reached out, put her hand on my chest. It was cold, so cold it burned. "You're supposed to choose," she said. "Every day, choose who you want to be, the man who killed me, or the man who learned from it. It's not that simple, isn't it? You think you're complicated, special, but you're just a man who makes choices, bad ones mostly." The room was changing, the walls cracking, revealing the dingy motel room underneath, and Megan was fading. "Wait," I said. "Tell me how to forgive myself." She smiled, sad and beautiful. "I can't, only you can. But first you have to stop. Stop running, stop hiding, stop hurting others because you're hurting." She was almost gone now, translucent. "Emma," I said desperately. "Is she okay?" The last thing I saw was her smile becoming warm, real. "She's perfect," she whispered. "She's going to be a doctor, like her mom wanted to be. And Martin, she doesn't need your guilt. Let it go. Choose better." And then she was gone. I was alone in the room 237, just a dirty motel room. When I walked back down to the parking lot, he was waiting, leaning against my car. "Feel better?" he asked. "Different. Different can be good." He crushed out a cigarette. "Ready to continue?" I looked back at the motel, at all the Thursday nights I'd spent there. "Yeah, I'm ready." We got back in the car, back onto the highway, east, toward home, toward Janet, toward my kids, toward a life I'd been running from. "So what are you?" I asked. "Angel? Demon?" That soft laugh. "Does it matter? I'm just someone who rides, someone who sees, someone who helps people see too. And you just stand on the side of the road. Everyone has secrets, Marcus, but not everyone is ready to face them. You were ready. That's why you stopped." We drove in comfortable silence. The highway opened up ahead, less like a tunnel now, more like a road. "Will I see you again?" I asked. "Do you want to?" "No, no offense. Good answer." He pointed ahead. "My stop's coming up." I looked. There was nothing there, no exit, just highway and darkness. There's nothing there. There's always something there. You just have to know how to look. I pulled over. He grabbed his backpack, got out, started walking back into the darkness. I watched him disappear, like he'd never been there at all. The rest of the drive was normal. The radio came back on somewhere around Oakley. I stopped for gas in Hayes. The kid behind the counter couldn't have been more than 19, same age as the girls. The realization made me sick. "You okay, mister?" he asked. "Yeah, just tired." I bought coffee, left a 20 for a $10 purchase. Small gesture, but it felt like a start. The sun was coming up when I reached Kansas City. I'd driven this route dozens of times and never noticed the sunrise, too wrapped up in my own darkness. I called Janet from a McDonald's parking lot in Topeka. "Hey, babe," she answered. "How'd the meeting go?" "Actually, it didn't. I need to tell you something when I get home." Silence, then, "Marcus, you're scaring me." "My name's not Marcus, it's Martin Sawyer. And 5 years ago, I killed someone, accidentally, and I've been running ever since." I could hear her breathing, processing. "Come home," she said finally. "Just come home. We'll figure it out." "You don't hate me?" "I don't know what I feel. But you're my husband, the father of my children, and you're calling me at 6 a.m. to tell me the truth. So come home." The drive home took 3 more hours. 3 hours to think about what I'd say, how I'd explain. Janet was at the kitchen table when I walked in, coffee cup between her hands. The kids were at school. "Hi," I said. "Hi." I sat down, and I told her everything. Chicago, the accident, Megan Phillips, the name change, the motel, the girls, all of it. She listened, didn't interrupt. When I finished, we sat in silence. 15 years, she said finally. 15 years of marriage, and none of it was real? The love was real, is real. The family we built on lies. Yes, but still built, still ours. She looked at me, really looked, seeing not Marcus the sales manager, but Martin, the real me, the girl you killed. Tell me about her. So I did. Young mother, nursing student, working nights to pay for school. A whole life gone. And her daughter? Emma, she's 9 now, lives with her sister, happy. That's good. She took a breath. Do you understand what you've done? Not just to them, but to us. Yes, I need time to think, to decide. Of course. I'll stay at a hotel. No more hotels, no more running. Guest room. We'll tell the kids you're sick, and we'll figure this out. Why not just throw me out? She was quiet, then, because I loved you. Love you? Because for 15 years you were a good husband, a good father, because people are complicated, and maybe you're not the only one with secrets. I looked at her, saw something I'd missed. She was carrying something too. Janet, later. Now you need to shower. Then figure out what you're going to do about Chicago, about the police, because I won't be married to a fugitive. So decide, keep running or stop. I'll stop, I'll call a lawyer, turn myself in. She nodded. Good. I went upstairs, sat on the guest room bed, called the Moonlight Motel first. Canceled my standing reservation. You sure, Mr. Smith? The manager asked. Yeah, I'm done. Then I called a lawyer. Patricia Hendricks. She specialized in cases like mine. Given the circumstances, she said, we might work something out. Probation, community service, restitution. Whatever it takes. After I hung up, Janet knocked. I called my sister, told her everything. She says I'm crazy for not throwing you out. Maybe you are. The thing is, I keep thinking about that hitchhiker you mentioned. Was he real? I thought about those eyes full of stars. About Megan in room 237. I don't know. Does it matter? She came in, sat on the bed, not close, but not across the room. Real or not, something happened. You're different, like you finally woke up. Maybe I did. The kids will be home soon. We need to figure out what to tell them. The truth, age appropriate, but the truth. She nodded. It'll be hard. Sarah especially. She idolizes you. Maybe it's good for her to know her dad isn't perfect, that people make mistakes but can try to fix them. She stood, walked to the door, stopped. Martin? That secret I mentioned 3 years ago, when you were in Dallas, I had an affair with David from book club, just twice. I ended it, but I did it. Because I was lonely, because you were always gone. The words hit, but also relief, like the playing field had leveled. I'm sorry I made you feel that way. I'm sorry, too, for all of it. We looked at each other, two broken people, two liars, two humans who'd made bad choices. So, what now? I asked. Now we pick up our kids, make dinner, help with homework, and tomorrow we start figuring out if we can build something new, something honest. I'd like that. Me too. But Martin, no more secrets, ever. You feel yourself starting to drift, you tell me. Deal? Deal? She left. I looked out the window. Somewhere out there, the hitchhiker was waiting. Thumb out, eyes full of impossible things, waiting for the next person ready to face their truth. I hoped they'd stop. I hoped they'd choose better. Because that's all any of us can do. Choose. Every day. Choose truth over lies. Choose facing over running, even if home is different now. Even if it needs rebuilding, it's still home, and that hitchhiker, the one who knows your darkest secret, he's not out there on some highway. He's in your passenger seat right now. Has been all along. Waiting. The only question is, are you ready to stop? The choice is yours. So I ask you, what's the one thing you've never told anyone? That secret you keep locked away? Because somewhere out there, he's waiting, and he already knows. The question is, when will you stop running from it? Think about that tonight, when you're lying in bed, when you can hear your own heartbeat in the silence. And if you found yourself gripping the wheel a little tighter during this story, if you found yourself thinking about your own secrets, maybe it's time to share this story. Hit that share button. Leave a comment about what choices you're ready to make. Subscribe if you want more stories about the things that wait in the darkness. Because the scariest stories aren't about monsters, they're about us, about what we carry, about what happens when we finally stop. Sweet dreams, if you can manage them. Story number 3. The phone rang at exactly 8:47 p.m. I know because I was staring at the microwave clock, waiting for my popcorn to finish. The Andersons had told me their landline might ring. Something about telemarketers who wouldn't take them off their list. They said to just let it go to voicemail. But it kept ringing. 7 times, 8, 9. The popcorn started popping faster, kernels exploding like tiny fireworks, and still that phone wouldn't stop. Finally, I grabbed it just to make it shut up. Hello? Silence. But not empty silence, breathing silence. The kind where you can feel someone on the other end waiting. Hello? I said again, louder this time. Then came the whisper, have you checked on the children? Click. My hand trembled as I set the phone back in its cradle. Some creep getting his kick scaring babysitters. Had to be. I'd heard about this stuff happening, pranks that went too far. But something about that voice. It didn't sound like it was trying to be scary. It sounded like it was trying to be helpful. And that's when our story really begins. My name is Emma, and I'd been babysitting for 3 years, ever since I turned 16. The Andersons were new clients recommended by my regular family, the Johnsons. They're lovely people, Mrs. Johnson had said. Just moved here from Seattle. You'll love their house. Love was an understatement. The Anderson house sat at the end of Maple Grove Lane, one of those streets where every house looked like it belonged in a magazine. Theirs was different, though. Modern, but warm. Floor-to-ceiling windows that should have felt exposed, but somehow felt cozy. The kind of place that whispered money without shouting it. Mrs. Anderson had given me the tour earlier that evening. The twins are already asleep, she'd said, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors. They're 6, Shouldn't give you any trouble. There's food in the fridge, Netflix is logged in, and she'd paused at the bottom of the stairs, perfectly manicured hand on the banister. If they wake up, just tell them Mommy and Daddy will be home soon. They've been having nightmares lately. About what? I'd asked. She'd waved her hand dismissively. Oh, you know how kids are. Monsters in the closet, that sort of thing. Mr. Anderson had appeared then, adjusting his tie. Ready, honey? The reservation's at 7. They'd left in a cloud of expensive perfume and cologne, and I'd settled in for what I thought would be an easy night. $50 to watch Netflix and eat popcorn while 2 kids slept upstairs. The house was perfect. Too perfect, maybe. Every surface gleamed. Every pillow precisely placed. Even the children's artwork on the fridge was arranged in neat rows, held by matching magnets. It felt like a house that was trying very hard to be a home. I'd done my usual babysitter reconnaissance, checked all the doors, locked, noted the exits, front, back, and side garage, and peeked in on the twins. They slept in separate rooms, which I thought was odd for 6-year-olds, but rich people did things differently. Both doors had those hotel-style locks on the outside. Child-proofing, Mrs. Anderson had explained, so they don't wander at night. The first hour passed peacefully. I'd found a true crime documentary on Netflix. Probably not the best choice for babysitting, but I loved trying to solve the cases before the show revealed the answer. I was good at noticing things other people missed, little details that didn't quite fit, like how the Andersons had no family photos displayed, not one, or how the twins' rooms had no toys visible, just beds and dressers, or how every window had blackout curtains even in the living room. But I pushed those observations aside. Rich people were weird, everyone knew that. Then came that first phone call, the one about checking on the children. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the popcorn finish its final pops, trying to convince myself it was nothing, just a prank. But my babysitter instincts kicked in, the ones that said better safe than sorry. I climbed the stairs slowly, wincing at every creak. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered, shadows pooling in corners the overhead light couldn't quite reach. The twins' doors stood closed, those outside locks gleaming silver in the dim light. I pressed my ear against the first door. Silence, then the second. Also quiet. Should I open them? Mrs. Anderson hadn't said not to, but something about those locks. The phone rang again. I nearly jumped out of my skin, heart hammering as I rushed back downstairs. This time, I was angry. Whoever this was, they'd picked the wrong babysitter to mess with. Listen, creep, I said into the phone. I don't know what your problem is, but I said, have you checked on the children? The same whisper, but urgent now, desperate, please. You need to check on them. You need to check on them now. Why? The word came out smaller than I intended. Who is this? There isn't time. Go, check, now. The line went dead. I stood there, phone in hand, every instinct screaming. But 2 different messages. Half of me said this was a setup, someone trying to get me to leave the doors unlocked so they could get in. The other half remembered Mrs. Anderson's hesitation on the stairs, her strange emphasis on nightmares. I went back upstairs. This time I noticed things. Scratches on the floor near the doors, like something had been dragged, or like someone had tried to claw their way out. The locks weren't just on the outside, they were deadbolts. Hotel-style childproofing didn't need deadbolts. My hand shook as I reached for the first lock. It turned easily, clicking open with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet house. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was empty, not just empty of a child. Empty, no furniture, no carpet, no curtains. Just bare walls and a single window, moonlight streaming across dusty floorboards. I backed out, heart racing, and tried the second door. Also empty. Where were the twins? Where was the furniture I'd seen earlier? I knew I'd checked on them. I remembered seeing two small forms under Disney-themed comforters, but now, the phone rang a third time. I ran downstairs, grabbed it before the second ring. "Where are they?" I demanded. "What did you do with the kids?" But the voice that answered wasn't the whisperer. It was Mrs. Anderson. "Emma, is everything all right? I just had the strangest feeling I should call and check in." I gripped the phone tighter. "Mrs. Anderson, the twins' rooms are empty, completely empty. Where are they?" Silence. Long enough that I thought we'd been disconnected. "Emma," she said finally, her voice different now. Colder. "What are you talking about? What twins?" My legs gave out. I slid down the kitchen wall, phone pressed to my ear, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. The twins," I stammered. "Your children. You showed me their rooms. You said they were 6. You said they'd been having nightmares." "Emma." Mrs. Anderson's voice was careful now, like she was talking to someone dangerous. "Richard and I don't have children. We never have. Are you feeling all right? Have you taken something?" "No." The word came out as almost a scream. "No, You showed me. The locks on the doors. You said they were child-proofing." "What locks?" "Emma, I think there's been some confusion. We asked you to house-sit, to watch the house while we're at dinner. Water the plants, make sure everything's secure. That's why we're paying you $50. It seemed like easy money for a few hours." The room spun. I pressed my free hand against the cool tile floor, trying to anchor myself to something real. "But I checked on them," I whispered. "When I first got here, I saw them sleeping." "Emma, I'm going to hang up now and call your parents. Stay where you are. Don't do anything. We'll be home soon." "Wait," but she'd already hung up. I sat there, phone silent in my hand, trying to piece together what was happening. Had I imagined it all? The tour, the children, the bedrooms? But no. I remembered it too clearly. Mrs. Anderson's red heels on the stairs. Her hand on my shoulder as she showed me the twins' rooms. The way the hallway light caught on those silver locks. The phone rang again. I stared at it, afraid to answer, afraid not to. On the fourth ring, I picked up. "You're starting to understand." The whisperer was back. "But you're not there yet. Go to the basement." "Who are you?" "Someone who's trying to help. The basement. Now. Before they come back." The line went dead. I'd never been shown a basement, hadn't even thought to look for one. But old houses like this always had basements, didn't they? I found the door in the pantry, painted the same white as the walls, almost invisible if you weren't looking for it. It was locked. But the key hung right there on a hook, like it was waiting for me. My hand trembled as I turned it, some part of my brain screaming that this was how people died in horror movies. But I had to know, had to understand what was happening. The stairs descended into darkness. I found a light switch and a single bulb flickered to life, casting everything in harsh shadows. The basement was unfinished. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, the smell of damp and something else. Something sweet and wrong. That's when I saw them. The photos. Dozens of them, pinned to a corkboard on the far wall. All children, all twins, all about 6 years old. Some looked recent, others faded with age, and at the bottom of each photo, written in neat handwriting. A date and a single word. Failed, failed, failed. My stomach lurched. I moved closer, even though every instinct told me to run. The dates went back years, decades. The oldest photo was sepia-toned, 2 children in Victorian clothing. 1897, failed. But it was the newest photos that made my blood run cold. 2 children, a boy and a girl, matching Harry Potter pajamas, taken in what looked like the upstairs bedrooms, the same bedrooms I'd checked. The date was today's date. But instead of failed, someone had written, "Tonight?" Behind me, a stair creaked. I spun around. No one there. But I could hear something now. Breathing. Not from the stairs. from the walls, like the house itself was inhaling and exhaling. Another creak. Closer. I backed away from the photos, from the stairs, deeper into the basement. There had to be another way out. These old houses always had storm doors, or... My foot hit something soft. I looked down and bit back a scream. A stuffed elephant, purple, with one eye missing. The kind of toy a 6-year-old might carry everywhere. And next to it, a single child's shoe. Blue, with Lightning McQueen on the side. The breathing in the walls grew louder. That's when I noticed the door. Set into the far wall, painted the same gray as the concrete, nearly invisible. No handle, just a deadbolt. Locked from the outside, just like the upstairs bedrooms. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Open it. I didn't want to. Everything in me screamed not to. But my hand moved anyway, drawn by something stronger than fear. The need to know, to understand. The deadbolt turned easily, too easily, like it had been oiled recently. The door swung inward, revealing a room that shouldn't exist. It was too big for the basement, extending beyond where the house foundations should end. And it was furnished like a child's bedroom. 2 beds, Disney comforters, toys scattered on the floor, and on the walls, drawings. Hundreds of them, all by children's hands, pictures of a house, of 2 people who might have been parents, and of something else. Something tall and dark, always standing in the corner of every picture. Movement in my peripheral vision. I turned, and for just a second I saw them. 2 children, translucent as smoke, sitting on the beds. The boy looked at me with hollow eyes. "She's coming," he whispered. Then they were gone. The front door slammed upstairs. "Emma?" Mrs. Anderson's voice, but different now. Older, like something wearing Mrs. Anderson's voice as a costume. "Emma, where are you, dear?" I backed out of the impossible room, pulling the door shut, turning the deadbolt. My hands shook so badly it took 3 tries. The basement stairs seemed to stretch forever as I climbed, each step heavier than the last. "There you are." Mrs. Anderson stood in the kitchen, still in her black dress, but something was wrong with her face. It kept shifting, like a TV with bad reception. One moment, she was the beautiful woman who'd hired me. The next, something ancient looked out through her eyes. "We came home early. Richard was worried about you." Mr. Anderson appeared behind her, and his face did the same shifting thing. Human, not human. Human again. My voice cracked. "I'm sorry, I got confused. I thought..." "You thought we had children." Mrs. Anderson smiled, and for a moment 2 many teeth filled her mouth. "Silly girl, why would we need a babysitter if we had no children? I should go." I sidled toward the door, but Mr. Anderson moved faster than anyone should be able to move, suddenly standing between me and the exit. "But you haven't finished your job," he said. "You haven't watched the house properly. Anything could have gotten in while you were exploring where you shouldn't." The phone rang. We all turned to stare at it. Mrs. Anderson's face twitched. "Don't answer that," she said. But I was already moving, diving for the phone before they could stop me. "Get out!" the whisperer screamed. "Get out now! They're not!" Mrs. Anderson yanked the phone cord from the wall. The plastic shattered, pieces flying across the pristine kitchen. When she turned back to me, her face had stopped pretending to be human. "You shouldn't have done that," she said with 2 many voices. I ran, not toward the door. Mr. Anderson still blocked that. I ran upstairs, taking the steps 3 at a time, while behind me came sounds that weren't quite footsteps, more like something wet dragging itself across the floor. The hallway stretched impossibly long, doors multiplying on either side, not 2 bedrooms now, but dozens. All with silver locks on the outside, all with scratches on the floor. Behind one door, children crying. Behind another, silence so complete it hurt. I tried the window at the end of the hall, painted shut. Or maybe there had never been a window, just wallpaper made to look like one. "Emma?" Mrs. Anderson's voice drifted up the stairs. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. You answered our ad. You came to our house. You agreed to watch it for us." "I agreed to babysit," I screamed. "Yes," Mr. Anderson replied. And now he was in the hallway with me, though I hadn't heard him climb the stairs. "That's exactly what you agreed to do." The truth hit me like ice water. They did have children, had them, took them, kept them. And when they failed, when whatever they were trying to do didn't work, they got new ones, found babysitters, young people who'd trust them, who'd come alone to an empty house. "We've been trying for so long," Mrs. Anderson said, now at the other end of the hallway. "So many attempts, so many failures. But you're different, Emma. You notice things. You went to the basement. You opened the door. The others never made it that far." "The others?" "Check your phone, dear." Against every instinct, I pulled out my phone. The lock screen showed dozens of missed calls. From Mom, from Dad, from numbers I didn't recognize. And texts, so many texts. "Emma, where are you? The Johnsons said they don't know anyone named Anderson. The police are looking for you. Please call us. It's been 3 days, baby. Please come home." 3 days? I'd only been here for... I looked at my hands. My nails had grown, my hair was longer, and I was hungry. So hungry. When had I last eaten? "Time works differently here," Mr. Anderson explained almost kindly. "We needed to make sure you were the right one, that you could see what others couldn't, open doors that shouldn't open, hear voices that shouldn't exist." "What are you?" The question came out as a whisper. Mrs. Anderson smiled with her wrong face. "Parents. We've always been parents. We just need the right children. Special children. Children who can survive in both worlds. But I'm not a child. I'm 19. "Oh, Emma." Both of them laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You've been 6 years old since the moment you walked through our door, just like all the others. We make you forget, make you think you're older, so you'll come willingly. But look, really look." I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. A 6-year-old girl stared back at me, wearing Lightning McQueen shoes and clutching a purple elephant with one missing eye. I screamed. The scream broke something. Reality flickered like a dying light bulb, showing me 2 truths at once. I was 19, standing in a hallway, hired to babysit. I was 6, trapped in a house that existed between spaces where things that weren't quite human played at being parents. Both were true. Neither was true. "There she is," Mrs. Anderson crooned, "our little girl. We've waited so long." "No." I backed away, but my body kept shifting. Adult, child, like I was caught between channels. "I'm not yours. I'm not anyone's. But you answered our call," Mr. Anderson said. 3 times you answered. Once to accept the job, once to hear the warning, once to choose your fate. That's how the binding works. The phone. The whispered warnings. Had they been trying to save me, or had they been part of the trap? "Who was on the phone?" I demanded. The Andersons exchanged a look that might have been sad on human faces. "The last one who said no," Mrs. Anderson admitted. "She's been trying to warn others ever since, calling from inside the house. Always inside. She can't leave, but she can't be taken either. Stuck between worlds, between forms. Rather sad, really. Inside the house. The calls had always been from inside the house. I thought of all those photos in the basement, all those failed attempts. Children who'd been brought here, kept here, broken here when they couldn't become whatever the Andersons needed them to be. Why? I asked. What's the point? Every world needs children, Mr. Anderson said simply. Our kind can't make them the usual way. So we adopt, transform. Those who survive the change become like us. Those who don't become warnings, I finished. Voices on phones, shadows in mirrors, failed. You understand? Mrs. Anderson clapped her hands in delight. Oh, you're perfect. Strong enough to see both worlds. Clever enough to find the basement, brave enough to open doors. You'll survive the change. I can feel it. And if I say no? Their faces went still, completely, unnaturally still. Then you become another voice, Mr. Anderson said. Another warning that no one will heed. Calling babysitters for decades, maybe centuries, trying to save them from your fate. Is that really better than joining our family? I thought about the desperation in the whisperer's voice. How long had she been calling? How many had she failed to save? Would that be me? Trapped forever in this house that wasn't quite real? Unable to leave? Unable to die? Just warning and warning while no one listened? But then I thought about the twins in the basement room. The translucent children who'd whispered, "She's coming." They'd survived the change, hadn't they? Become whatever the Andersons were. And what then? An eternity of luring other children? Of playing this sick game over and over? I want to talk to her, I said suddenly. The one who calls. The one who warned me. The Andersons looked at each other. That's unusual, Mrs. Anderson said. But not against the rules, I pressed. I was guessing, but something in their faces told me I was right. These things, whatever they were, had rules, patterns. You answered 3 calls. You made a choice. There were structures to follow. Mr. Anderson sighed, a sound like wind through empty rooms. Very well. He gestured to the phone in the hallway, the one I hadn't noticed before. An old rotary model, dust-covered and forgotten-looking. But the moment I touched it, it rang. Hello? My voice sounded young. So young. Oh God, you're still there. The whisperer sounded clearer now, tired, so tired. I tried to warn you. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. How long? I asked. Since 1987, I was 17, or 7, both. Neither, time doesn't. It's hard to remember what was real. What's your name? A pause. Sarah, I think. Sometimes I remember being Sarah. Sarah, is there a way out? Any way? Only the choice. You can join them or join me. Those are the only options, unless... Unless... Her voice dropped even lower. Unless you can make them answer the phone 3 times. Make them choose. But they're old. Older than the house. Older than... They know the tricks. I looked at the Andersons. They watched me with patient, inhuman eyes. How many? I asked them. How many have you taken? Successful transformations? 12, over the centuries. They're out there now, making families of their own. The failures, well, you saw the photos. Dozens of photos, maybe hundreds, all those children trapped between worlds. I want to see them, I said. All of them, every voice in this house, every failed child. Before I choose. Mrs. Anderson's face rippled. That's not how it works. But it's not against the rules, I said, gambling everything on the patterns I'd noticed. These creatures loved their rules, their rituals. 3 calls, 3 choices, everything in 3s. I have the right to see what I'm choosing between. They couldn't deny it. I saw it in their shifting faces. Whatever laws governed them, I'd found a loophole. Mr. Anderson waved his hand, and the house unfolded. Every door in the hallway swung open. From each one, a child stepped out, or something that had been a child. Some were shadows. Some were whispers. Some were just suggestions of faces in this air. All ages, from toddlers to teenagers, though I understood now that age meant nothing here. They'd all been made 6 when they entered. All been given the choice. So many, so heartbreakingly many. Now, Mrs. Anderson said, and her voice held an edge of impatience. Choose. I looked at the assembled failures. At Sarah, who I could see now, a girl made of static and regret. At the twins from the basement, who stood apart from the others. transformed but not quite like the Andersons. Still children, even in their monstrous shapes. Then I smiled. "I choose," I said, "to make you answer the phone." Before they could react, I lunged for the old rotary phone and dialed the only number that mattered in this place. The house's own number. The number from the ad that had started all this. The kitchen phone rang. "Don't," Mr. Anderson snarled, but he was already moving toward it. Compelled. The rules working against him now. He picked up on the third ring. "Hello?" His voice sounded different, smaller, confused. I spoke into the rotary phone, letting my voice become something else. Something like theirs. "Have you checked on the children?" The house shuddered, reality cracked, and for the first time since I'd entered this place, I heard the Andersons scream. The news called it a gas leak explosion. The Anderson house on Maple Grove Lane simply vanished one October night, leaving nothing but a perfectly square hole in the ground. No bodies were found. No explanation ever surfaced. I woke up in my own bed, 3 days after I'd left for a babysitting job no one else remembered. My parents said I'd had the flu. Strange dreams, nothing to worry about. But sometimes, late at night, my phone rings. Different voices each time. Sarah, free at last, calling to say thank you. The twins, existing in whatever realm things like them exist in, finally at peace. And sometimes, very rarely, 2 ancient voices asking if I need a babysitter. I always let it go to voicemail. They say the Anderson house is gone, but I know better. It's still there, between spaces, between worlds, waiting. The ad will appear again someday, in some newspaper, on some website. Someone will answer it. Someone always does. But now, there are new voices trying to warn them. Stronger voices. Voices that remember being both 6 and 16, both real and not real. Voices that know the rules. If you ever see an ad for a babysitting job that pays too well, in a house that seems too perfect from parents who smile too wide, don't answer it. Or if you do, if you must, remember this. They have rules. The phone rings 3 times, and sometimes, just sometimes, the calls really are coming from inside the house. But here's what they don't tell you in the warnings. What I learned that night in the space between child and adult, between real and unreal. The house isn't just a trap. It's a test. And every so often, someone passes. What happens to those who pass? Well, let's just say I sleep with my phone on silent now. All of them. Even the ones I don't remember buying. Especially the old rotary model that sometimes appears on my nightstand, dust-covered and impossible. Because once you've answered the call, once you've heard the voices, once you've made the choice, you're never really outside the house again. Sweet dreams, and whatever you do, don't answer the phone. Story number 4. The smell hit me first. Lavender mixed with something chemical. Antiseptic, maybe. It wasn't unpleasant, just wrong somehow. Like when you walk into a room and know someone's been there who shouldn't have been. Before we dive into today's session, Dr. Martinez said, her voice cutting through my thoughts, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest with me. She leaned forward in her leather chair, the kind that probably cost more than my car. Have you been experiencing any unusual dreams lately? My mouth went dry. How did she know? 3 weeks. That's how long I'd been having them. Dreams so vivid I'd wake up tasting blood that wasn't there. Feeling rain on my skin in my bone-dry apartment. Hearing children laughing when I lived alone on the 7th floor. But here's the thing that made my skin crawl. The thing that brought me to her office in the first place. I wasn't just dreaming these things. I was remembering them. Remembering things that never happened to me. Remembering being someone else entirely. If you've ever felt like you're losing your mind, like reality is slipping through your fingers like water, then you know exactly why I was sitting in that too-soft chair, staring at a therapist I'd found through a Reddit recommendation at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. And if you haven't felt that way, well, consider yourself lucky, because what happened next in that dim office on Maple Street in downtown Portland? What Dr. Martinez helped me unlock, it changed everything I thought I knew about memory, about identity, about what makes us, us. The story begins now. I shifted in the chair, feeling the leather stick to my sweaty palms. Outside, Portland rain tapped against the window like nervous fingers. Yeah, I finally admitted. The dreams have been intense. Dr. Martinez nodded, scribbling something on her yellow legal pad. She always used yellow, said it helped her remember better. Funny how we all have our little quirks. Tell me about the most recent one. I closed my eyes. The memory, dream, whatever it was, came flooding back. I was in a kitchen, not mine, old linoleum floor, those hideous orange countertops from the 70s. There was a woman there, brown hair, wearing a floral apron. She was making grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup from a can. Campbell's. I could see the label. Go on. She was humming something. You Are My Sunshine. And I knew her. Not like I'd seen her before. I knew her. Knew that she always burned the edges of the sandwiches just a little because that's how her mother made them. Knew that she'd add a dash of oregano to the soup when no one was looking. Knew that she was worried about her husband's drinking but would never say anything because good wives didn't complain in 1973. I opened my eyes. Dr. Martinez had stopped writing. How did you know it was 1973? The calendar on the wall. May 1973. There was a dentist appointment written in blue pen for the 15th. Dr. Henley on Burnside. She set down her pen entirely now. Michael. Burnside Dental closed in 1987. Dr. Henley retired in 1975. He died in 1992. The room suddenly felt too small. How do you know that? Because Dr. Henley was my grandfather. Silence stretched between us like taffy. The rain outside grew heavier. This woman in your dream, can you describe her more? I swallowed hard. About 5'4", hazel eyes, a small scar above her left eyebrow from a bicycle accident when she was 7. She was 28 in the dream. Birthday in November, the 23rd. Dr. Martinez's face had gone pale. She reached into her desk drawer with shaking hands and pulled out an old photograph. Faded colors. A woman in a floral apron standing in a kitchen with orange countertops. Is this her? My heart stopped. It was. Every detail. Even the way she tilted her head slightly to the left when she smiled. That's my grandmother, Dr. Martinez whispered. She died in 1974, a year after that photo was taken. I was 2 years old. I gripped the armrests of the chair. I don't understand. I've never seen that photo. I don't know your family. I don't... Michael. Her voice was steady now, professional, but I could see fear flickering in her eyes. Have you ever heard of genetic memory? Like inherited memories? That's science fiction. Most scientists think so, but there have been studies. Mice inheriting fear responses from parents they never met. Children knowing things about ancestors they couldn't possibly know. It's controversial, but what? She leaned back, studying me. Tell me about your family. Your biological family. Not much to tell. I was adopted. Closed adoption. My birth parents died in a car accident when I was 3 months old. No living relatives. What was your birth name? Michael Henley. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Martinez's hands trembled as she picked up the photograph again. My grandmother's maiden name was Henley. Her brother Robert died in a car accident in 1995 with his wife Sarah. They had a 3-month-old son who was put up for adoption. The room spun. I gripped the chair tighter. You're saying... I'm saying that according to my family history, you're my second cousin, And somehow, you're remembering my grandmother's life, your great-aunt's life. I stood up abruptly, needing to move, needing air. This is insane. This doesn't happen. Memories don't just jump generations. Sit down, Michael, please. Something in her tone made me comply. There's more, isn't there? She asked quietly. Other memories. Other people. I nodded, not trusting my voice. How many? Dozens, maybe more. Men, women, children, different times, different places. I thought I was going crazy. That's why I came here. I found your name online and you were drawn to me specifically? I hadn't thought about it that way, but yeah, I was. She was writing again, fast, almost frantically. Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think very carefully. When did these memories start? 3 weeks ago, right after... After what? I didn't want to say it. Saying it made it real, made it connected. After my appendectomy. Her pen stopped mid-word. You had surgery 3 weeks ago? Emergency surgery. My appendix burst. They said I was technically dead for 2 minutes on the table. Dr. Martinez set down her pen and folded her hands. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Michael, what if you didn't come back alone? The word hung in the air between us. Alone. Such a simple word. Such a terrifying implication. What do you mean? Dr. Martinez stood and walked to her bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines until she found what she was looking for. An old journal, leather-bound and worn. My grandmother kept diaries, detailed ones. I've read them all, looking for clues about our family history, mental illness, patterns, that sort of thing. She flipped through pages covered in careful cursive. Here, May 15th, 1973. She handed me the journal. The entry was short. Strange dream last night. Saw myself from outside my body, watching me make lunch for Tommy. Felt like someone else was there with me, looking through my eyes, looking for something, or someone. The feeling hasn't left all day, like I'm being watched from inside my own head. My hands shook. This was the same day, the exact same day I remembered. Keep reading. The next entry was longer, more frantic. It's getting worse. I see faces when I close my eyes. People I've never met, places I've never been. A hospital room with machines I don't recognize. A young man with kind eyes lying very still. Doctors working over him. I hear them saying he's gone, but I know he's not. He's here. With me. In me. I think I'm losing my mind. Harold wants me to see a doctor, but what would I tell them? That I have someone else's memories? That I know things I couldn't possibly know? I looked up at Dr. Martinez. She was pale, but composed. My grandmother died by suicide 6 months later. The official cause was postpartum depression. My uncle had just been born, but her last diary entry... She took the journal back, flipping to the end. She wrote about the voices, the memories that weren't hers. She wrote that she was afraid she was contagious, that she might pass it on. Pass what on? The ability to remember, to hold memories that don't belong to us. She closed the journal carefully. Michael, I think when you died on that operating table, something opened. A door, a channel, I don't know. But I think you came back carrying more than just your own consciousness. I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. So what, I'm possessed? Is that what you're telling me? No, not possessed. Think of it more like a receiver picking up signals. Most of us are tuned to one frequency, our own. But near-death experiences, extreme trauma, certain genetic predispositions, they can broaden the bandwidth. You're talking about this like it's real, like it's possible. She sat back down across from me. 3 years ago, I had a patient, a little girl, 7 years old. She'd nearly drowned in a pool. After they revived her, she started speaking Polish, fluently. Her parents only spoke English and Spanish. She knew details about Warsaw during World War II that she couldn't have learned from books. Streets that had been renamed. Buildings that had been demolished. What happened to her? The memories faded after a few months, but during that time we traced her descriptions to a specific person. A woman named Katarzyna, who died in the Warsaw Ghetto. No relation to the family. No connection at all except what? Except that Katarzyna died by drowning in a basement that flooded during a bombing raid. The rain outside had turned into a storm. Lightning flashed, illuminating the office in stark relief. In that brief moment, I could have sworn I saw other faces in the reflection of the window. Watching. Waiting. So, these memories, they're from people who died? That's my theory. Consciousness seeking consciousness. Memories looking for a home. She leaned forward. Michael, I need you to understand something. If this is what's happening, if you're really experiencing what I think you are, then you're not crazy, but you might be in danger. Danger from what? From losing yourself. The human mind isn't meant to hold multiple life experiences. My grandmother, she couldn't handle it. The boundaries between her memories and the others became too blurred. She forgot who she was. As if on cue, a memory that wasn't mine surged forward. I was suddenly 6 years old, hiding under a bed while my father, no, someone's father, raged in the next room. I could smell whiskey and fear and the musty scent of the carpet. I knew with absolute certainty that in 3 minutes and 17 seconds he would find me. He always found me. Michael? Dr. Martinez's voice seemed to come from very far away. Michael, stay with me. Focus on my voice. But other voices were louder now. A cacophony of lives lived and lost. A mother singing lullabies in Italian. A soldier bleeding out in a jungle in Vietnam. A teenager taking her first drag of a cigarette behind a high school in 1987. They all clamored for attention, for recognition, for remembrance. I can't, I gasped, gripping the chair. There's too many. They all want... What do they want? The answer came not from me, but through me. A dozen voices speaking in unison through my throat. To be remembered. To be found. To go home. Dr. Martinez grabbed my hands. Her touch was warm, solid, real, an anchor in the storm of memories. Michael, listen to me. You are Michael Chen. You are 29 years old. You live in Portland. You work as a software developer. You have a cat named Schrodinger. These are your memories. Your life. Hold on to them. I repeated the facts like a mantra. My name is Michael Chen. I am 29 years old. I live in Portland. But even as I said them, I could feel them slipping, becoming just one story among hundreds. We need to find out why this is happening to you specifically, Dr. Martinez said urgently. Why now? Why these particular memories? There has to be a connection. Through the chaos in my mind, one thought emerged clearly. It wasn't my thought, but it felt important. The hospital, I said, though I wasn't sure if it was me speaking or one of them. Something about the hospital where I had surgery, something wrong there, something... The lights in the office flickered and went out. In the darkness, I could swear I heard my grandmother, Dr. Martinez's grandmother, whisper, "They're collecting us, harvesting us, and you're the key to finding out why." Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the office in an eerie red glow. Dr. Martinez was already moving, pulling files from a locked cabinet I hadn't noticed before. "I've been researching this for years," she said, spreading papers across her desk. "Unexplained phenomena after near-death experiences. Memory transfer, consciousness overlap. Most of my colleagues think I'm chasing ghosts." "Aren't you?" She gave me a look that was equal parts fear and determination. "Maybe. But ghosts leave traces, patterns." She pulled out a map of Portland marked with red X's. "Every case I've documented in the last 5 years, Notice anything? The marks clustered around one area. My blood ran cold. They're all near St. Mary's Hospital, where I had my surgery. 43 cases, all within a 5-mile radius, all after medical procedures at St. Mary's. She pulled out another sheet. And here's the really interesting part. The memories these people experienced, I've been able to trace 17 of them to specific deceased individuals. Guess where they all died? I didn't need to guess. The answer was obvious and terrifying. St. Mary's. The hospital has been operational since 1952. Thousands of people have died there. Normal for any hospital. But what's not normal is this. She showed me a printout of numbers and graphs I couldn't quite focus on. The memories in my head were getting louder, more insistent. The electromagnetic readings around the hospital are off the charts. Have been for years. The administration claims it's from all the medical equipment, but you don't think so. No, I think something is keeping them there, the consciousness of the deceased, trapping them somehow. And when living patients have near-death experiences, they can cross over, attach themselves. I finished, though I wasn't sure if the knowledge came from me or from one of the others. A memory surfaced. Not mine. A doctor in a white coat, but not a modern one. This was from the 60s, maybe. He was standing in a basement room at St. Mary's, surrounded by strange equipment. Electrodes and wires and things I didn't recognize. He was speaking to someone I couldn't see. The electromagnetic field will contain them. Hold them. We can study the nature of consciousness itself. Death doesn't have to be the end. We can preserve them, learn from them. I gasped, coming back to myself. Dr. Martinez was watching me intently. You saw something. I told her about the memory. Her face paled with each word. Medical experiments. They were trying to trap consciousness after death. She shuffled through her papers frantically. There were rumors in the 70s. A doctor at St. Mary's lost his license for unethical experiments. Dr. Marcus Ashford. He was obsessed with proving consciousness survived bodily death. What happened to him? He died in 1978. Heart attack. At St. Mary's. She looked up at me. Michael, if he created some kind of field or trap for consciousness and then died there himself, he could still be there running things, collecting more. It sounded insane. Everything about this sounded insane. But the memories in my head, the voices, they were getting more agitated, more urgent. They knew we were getting close to something. We need to go there, I said, though every rational part of me screamed against it. Tonight, we need to find out what's in that basement. Dr. Martinez shook her head. That's too dangerous. If what we're thinking is true, that place is essentially a massive supernatural battery. You're already compromised. Going there could what? Make me crazier? I've got dozens of dead people in my head, Doc. How much worse can it get? As if in answer, a new memory crashed through. But this one was different. Clearer, more recent. I was lying on an operating table. No, someone else was. A middle-aged woman. The anesthesia was wearing off too soon. She could hear the doctors talking but couldn't move, couldn't speak. And standing in the corner of the operating room, unseen by everyone else, was an old man in a doctor's coat. Dr. Ashford. He was smiling. Another one, he said, though no one could hear him but the dying woman. Don't worry, my dear. You won't really die. You'll join the others. We're building something beautiful here. A collective. A hive mind of human experience. And soon, very soon, we'll have enough power to break free. To live again. The woman tried to scream but couldn't. Her heart monitor flatlined. And in those final moments, she felt herself being pulled not up, but sideways. Into the walls, into the very foundation of the hospital itself. I came back to myself on the floor of Dr. Martinez's office. She was kneeling beside me, checking my pulse, "We have to stop this," I gasped. "He's collecting them. Hundreds, maybe thousands. They're trapped there. They want out. They need out. Michael, you're in no condition." I grabbed her hand. "You said your grandmother killed herself because of the voices. What if it wasn't suicide? What if they drove her to it? What if that's what happens to everyone who gets too close to the truth?" She helped me sit up, and I could see the war in her eyes. Professional caution versus personal investment. "Even if we go," she said finally, "what can we do? We can't exactly exorcise an entire hospital." A voice that wasn't mine spoke through my lips. My great-aunt, Dr. Martinez's grandmother. "The machine. He built a machine. It's still there, still running. Destroy it, and we can rest. Please, free us." Dr. Martinez stared at me, at her grandmother speaking through me. Tears ran down her cheeks. "Grandma? I'm sorry, sweetie. I'm so sorry I left you, but I couldn't. The voices, they never stopped, never let me rest. He won't let any of us rest. Please help us." The moment passed, and I was myself again. Mostly myself. The boundaries were getting harder to maintain. Dr. Martinez wiped her eyes and stood, suddenly all business. Okay, we go tonight, after visiting hours. I know a security guard who owes me a favor, but... Michael, she looked at me intently. "If we do this, there's a chance you won't come back as just yourself. The closer you get to the source, the stronger the pull will be. You could lose yourself entirely." I thought about the voices in my head, the memories of lives cut short. Children who never grew up. Parents who never got to say goodbye. All of them trapped in some megalomaniac's experiment. I'll take that chance. Because here's the thing about being haunted. Sometimes the ghosts aren't trying to hurt you. Sometimes they're just trying to tell you something. And sometimes what they're trying to tell you is that they need help. Dr. Martinez made a call. Gathered supplies, salt, iron filings, an EMF detector she'd bought for her research. I didn't know if any of it would help, but it made us feel like we were doing something. As we prepared to leave, one more memory surfaced. This one felt different, newer, familiar. It was me, 3 weeks ago, on the operating table. But I was seeing it from outside my body, and I wasn't alone. They were all there. The trapped souls of St. Mary's, watching, waiting. And when my heart stopped, when that door between life and death cracked open, they rushed toward it. Not to escape, but to send a message. To send me back with their stories, their memories, their desperate plea for help. I wasn't haunted. I was chosen. "Ready?" Dr. Martinez asked. I nodded, though ready was the last thing I felt. As we left her office and stepped into the storm, I heard them all whisper in unison, "He's waiting for you. He's been waiting for someone like you. Someone who can hear us all. Someone who can set us free or join us forever." St. Mary's Hospital looked different at night. The cheerful facade that welcomed patients during the day took on a sinister quality in the darkness. Rain lashed against our windshield as Dr. Martinez pulled into the employee parking lot. "You sure about this?" she asked one more time. I wasn't, but the voices in my head were reaching a crescendo. They knew we were close. "Second basement level," I said, though I'd never been there before. "East wing, behind the old radiology storage." Dr. Martinez's contact, a security guard named Jerome, met us at a side entrance. He looked nervous. 20 minutes, he said. "That's all I can give you before my supervisor makes rounds. And if anyone asks, you weren't here." We nodded and slipped inside. The hospital at night was a different world. Dim emergency lighting cast long shadows down empty corridors. The antiseptic smell was stronger somehow, mixed with something else. Something older. Decay, maybe, or fear. The memories were pulling me forward now. I didn't need directions. My feet knew the way. Dr. Martinez followed, EMF detector in hand. It had been beeping steadily since we entered, but as we descended the first set of stairs, it went wild. "The readings are off the charts," she whispered. "Michael, the electromagnetic field here. It shouldn't be possible." We reached the second basement, older than the rest of the hospital. The walls were concrete, sweating moisture. Pipes groaned overhead. And there, at the end of a hallway that shouldn't exist according to any modern floor plan, was a door marked "Storage authorized personnel only," but underneath, barely visible, older lettering spelled out "Consciousness Research Laboratory." My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. The moment I touched it, the voices in my head went silent. All of them. The sudden quiet was more terrifying than their constant chatter. The door opened easily. Too easily. Inside was a room that belonged in a horror movie. Ancient medical equipment lined the walls. Electrodes and wires and things I couldn't identify. In the center sat a massive machine, all copper coils and glass tubes humming with electricity. It looked like something Tesla might have built if he'd gone insane. And standing beside it, as solid as any living person, was Dr. Marcus Ashford. "Finally," he said, smiling. "I was beginning to think I'd have to wait another decade for someone with your particular gifts." Dr. Martinez gasped. She could see him too. "You're dead," she said. "Death," Ashford replied, "is a matter of perspective. I prefer to think of myself as evolved, free from the constraints of flesh, pure consciousness maintained by my beautiful machine." The humming grew louder. Around us, the air shimmered. Other figures began to materialize. Dozens of them, hundreds. The collected dead of St. Mary's Hospital, all standing silent, all staring at us with empty eyes. "You've been collecting them," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Trapping them. Preserving them," Ashford corrected. "Every human consciousness is precious, unique. Why should death mean the end of all that knowledge, all that experience? Here," they continue, "here. They're part of something greater. They're prisoners." The words burst from me, powered by the fury of every trapped soul I'd been carrying. "They don't want this. They want to move on, to rest." Ashford's smile faltered. "They don't know what they want. They're fragments, echoes. But together, unified under my guidance, they could be so much more. And you," his eyes gleamed, "you're the missing piece, a living conduit, someone who can bridge the gap between the living and the dead. With you integrated into the system, I could expand beyond these walls. Imagine it. A network of consciousness spanning the entire city, the entire world. Death would become meaningless." "You're insane." "Am I? You've felt it, haven't you? The beauty of shared memory, the vastness of collective experience. Why cling to the limitations of individual identity when you could be part of everything?" He was right about one thing. I had felt it. The intoxicating rush of living multiple lives. But I'd also felt the pain, the confusion, the loss of self. "Michael," Dr. Martinez said quietly, "the machine, if we can disrupt it." Ashford laughed. "You think I haven't protected my life's work? The moment you damage that machine, every consciousness trapped here will be released at once. The psychic backlash would kill you both instantly, or worse, scatter your minds across 1,000 fragments. You'd spend eternity as broken pieces, never whole, never at rest." The trapped souls around us stirred. Some reached out, pleading. Others just stared with those empty eyes. I could feel their desperation, their longing for freedom. "There has to be another way," I said. "There is." Ashford stepped closer. "Join us willingly. Become the bridge I need. Help me perfect the system. In return, I'll give you control. You can release whoever you want. Keep whoever you choose. You'd have the power of life and death over consciousness itself. It was tempting. God help me, it was tempting. The power to free my great-aunt, to give all these souls peace, or to keep the ones I'd grown attached to, the soldier who'd shown me courage, the mother who'd taught me lullabies, the teenager who'd shared her first taste of rebellion. But then I remembered why I'd come here. Not for power, not for knowledge, but because people were suffering and I could help. No, the word hung in the air. Ashford's face darkened. Then you'll join them anyway. The machine will take you, willing or not. The humming intensified. The trapped souls moved closer, reaching for me with translucent hands. I could feel the pull, the inexorable drag toward the machine. Beside me, Dr. Martinez was fighting too, but she didn't have my connection. She couldn't resist like I could. "Michael," she gasped, falling to her knees. "I can't." That's when I realized something. Ashford had made a mistake. He'd said the machine would take me, willing or not. But I wasn't just me anymore. I was carrying dozens of other consciousnesses, other souls who'd already been trapped once. And they were angry. "You want me?" I said, stepping toward the machine. "Fine, take me. Take all of us." Ashford's eyes widened as he realized what I was doing. "No, stop. The machine can't handle that many at once." But it was too late. I opened myself fully to the voices, the memories, the souls I'd been carrying. And together we rushed toward the machine. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The machine, designed to process one consciousness at a time, was suddenly flooded with dozens. Sparks flew from the copper coils. The glass tubes shattered. The humming became a shriek of tortured metal. "No!" Ashford screamed. "My work, my legacy." Around us, the trapped souls began to flicker, their empty eyes filled with awareness, with hope. The electromagnetic field holding them was failing. "Run!" I shouted to Dr. Martinez. "Get out now." She hesitated for a moment, then ran. Smart woman. I stayed, pouring every memory, every voice, every borrowed life into the failing machine. I felt myself fragmenting, spreading thin, but I held on. The souls I'd carried were helping, adding their strength to mine. Ashford tried to stop me, his ghostly hands passing through me harmlessly. "You don't understand. Without the machine, they'll all fade. True death. Oblivion." "Maybe," I gasped, feeling my own consciousness starting to fray, "but it's their choice, not yours." The machine gave one final terrible shriek and exploded. The psychic shockwave knocked me to the ground. Around me, the trapped souls began to glow. One by one, they smiled, real smiles, not those empty stares, and faded away, moving on to wherever souls go when they're finally free. Ashford raged and pleaded, but his form was fading too. Without the machine to sustain him, he was just another ghost, just another memory. "You've doomed them all," he cried as he dissolved. "You've doomed yourself." Maybe I could feel myself unraveling. The memories I'd carried were leaving too, returning to their owners as they passed on. Soon, I'd be alone in my head again, if I survived. The room spun, the walls cracked. 70 years of supernatural energy releasing all at once was tearing the place apart. I crawled toward the door, my vision blurring. I made it to the hallway before I collapsed. The last thing I saw was my great-aunt, Dr. Martinez's grandmother. She knelt beside me, looking young and whole and at peace. "Thank you," she whispered. "We're free now, all of us, because of you." She kissed my forehead, and I felt warmth spread through me. Strength I didn't have. Enough to stand. Enough to run. I burst through the exit just as the east wing of the basement collapsed. Dr. Martinez was waiting in the car, engine running. We peeled out of the parking lot as alarms blared and emergency vehicles rushed toward the hospital. Neither of us spoke during the drive back. What was there to say? We'd faced the impossible and somehow survived. But as we pulled up to my apartment, Dr. Martinez finally asked, "How do you feel?" I did a mental inventory. The voices were gone. The memories that weren't mine had faded. I was just Michael Chen again, just one person in one body with one set of experiences. It felt empty and free. "Like myself," I said. "Finally, like myself." She nodded. "The hospital, they'll investigate the collapse, find the room. Do you think they'll believe?" "No. They'll find some rational explanation. Gas leak, structural failure, whatever lets them sleep at night." We sat in silence for a moment more. "Your grandmother," I said finally. "She's at peace now. They all are." Dr. Martinez wiped away a tear. "Thank you. For everything." I got out of the car, exhausted beyond belief. But before I closed the door, she called out, "Michael, what you did! Choosing to free them instead of taking the power, that was remarkable." I shrugged. It wasn't really a choice. They'd been prisoners long enough. As I watched her drive away, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Quiet. Beautiful, blessed quiet in my own mind. I was about to head inside when I noticed something. A flutter of movement in my peripheral vision. I turned, and there, in the window of the apartment across the street, stood a little girl. Pale, translucent, watching me with curious eyes. My heart sank. St. Mary's wasn't the only place in Portland where people died. Wasn't the only place where souls might get trapped. And apparently, my brief time as a conduit had left me with a permanent gift. Or curse, the little girl waved. Hesitantly, I waved back. Maybe I wasn't done helping the dead find peace. Maybe this was just the beginning. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I heard a whisper. Not in my head this time, but carried on the wind. "Thank you for freeing us. But there are others. So many others. Waiting, hoping. Will you help them too?" I paused at my door, key in hand. The smart thing would be to say no, to close myself off, to pretend none of this had happened. But I thought about all those souls at St. Mary's. Decades of imprisonment. Decades of suffering. How many other places were like that? How many other souls were trapped by tragedy, by unfinished business, by people like Ashford who thought they could cheat death? I unlocked my door and stepped inside. Tomorrow, I'd call Dr. Martinez. We'd figure out what to do next, how to use this gift responsibly, how to help without losing myself. But tonight, I just wanted to sleep in my own bed, in my own body, with my own memories. The little girl in the window across the street had vanished. But I knew she'd be back. They always came back. Because here's the thing about being the only person who can hear the dead. They never stop calling. My name is Michael Chen. I'm 29 years old. I live in Portland. And 3 weeks ago, I died for 2 minutes and came back carrying the memories of the dead. If you're still listening, if this story kept you up, if you felt that chill down your spine when I described the little girl in the window, then you know. You know that sometimes the scariest things aren't monsters or demons. Sometimes the scariest thing is realizing that death isn't the end, that consciousness can linger, that memories can outlive their owners. And sometimes, just sometimes, those memories find their way into the living. Sweet dreams. And if you wake up tomorrow with a memory that isn't yours, a face you've never seen but somehow recognize, a name on your lips that you've never heard before, well, you know where to find me, because I learned something that night at St. Mary's. Something that changes everything. We're never really alone, not in our minds, not in our memories, and definitely not in our dreams. The question is, whose memories will you wake up with tomorrow? Whose life will you remember? And more importantly, will you still remember your own? Pause for 3 seconds of silence. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever experienced something you couldn't explain, I want to hear about it. Leave a comment below, share your story, because the more we talk about these things, the less power they have over us. And who knows, maybe you're carrying someone else's memory right now. Maybe that's why this story felt so familiar. Maybe that's why you couldn't stop listening. Until next time, sleep well, if you can.